The yarn is a whisper against my skin, a soft cascade of crimson wool that holds the warmth of my own hands. It is the same shade I used for my Henry's stocking, 52 Christmases ago. My fingers, though stiffer now, knotted with the gentle betrayal of time, know this dance by heart. Knit 1, purl 2. The rhythm is a prayer, a lullaby. Each stitch is not just a loop of fiber. It is a memory, a wish, a piece of my soul I am weaving into a vessel for hope. This one is for Liam, my grandson. I imagine the sturdy, practical gifts his father, my Marcus, will place inside it. Perhaps a set of good woodworking tools to honor the boy's careful hands. The next stitch is a wish for patience, for the world moves too fast for a young man like him. I set Liam's stocking aside, its white cuff embroidered with a tiny, intricate hammer, and I take up the emerald green. This is for Amara. The yarn is the color of deep forests and secrets, just like her eyes. She has her grandfather's eyes, that same quiet way of seeing everything. Her stocking is more delicate. I am working on a small, soaring bird along the cuff, its wings outstretched. A wish for her to fly, to be unburdened. My needle dips and rises, pulling the thread through. The fire crackles in the hearth of my small, comfortable cottage, and for a moment I am not alone. Henry is in the chair opposite, reading his newspaper, his spectacles perched on the end of his nose. He looks up and smiles, and the memory is so vivid I can almost feel the warmth of his hand on mine. This was our tradition. The stockings were not merely decorations, they were the foundation. They were the first thing hung on Christmas Eve, a promise of the love that would fill the room come morning. I finish the bird's wing and hold the stocking up to the firelight. It is perfect. It is love made tangible. Tomorrow, I will present them to Marcus and his family. I imagine his face, a man now with a home and responsibilities of his own, seeing this piece of his childhood, this piece of me, passed down. I imagine Amara's small, serious face lighting up as I tell her the story of her bird. This is the thread that connects us, from my hands to theirs, from my heart to theirs. It is a fragile thread, I know, but I believe it is strong enough. Across town, in a house where the walls are painted in minimalist shades of gray and beige, Marcus adjusted the final ornament on a tree that looked as if it had been photographed for a magazine. Every silver ball was perfectly spaced. Every white LED light was uniformly twinkling. There was no tangle of childhood crafts, no mismatched, beloved baubles from decades past. This was Tamara's vision of Christmas, elegant, sophisticated, controlled. It just needs one more thing, Tamara said, her voice crisp as she surveyed the room. She was a beautiful woman with a sharpness to her beauty that Marcus found endlessly compelling. She knew what she wanted, and she built a life around that certainty. He admired that. The garland on the staircase is a little asymmetrical on the left side. Can you fix it? Of course, Marcus said, moving to adjust the pristine faux pine garland. He wanted everything to be perfect for her, for Liam, for Amara. This was his offering, a beautiful, seamless life, free of the clutter and the sentimental chaos he remembered from his own childhood. A life where everything had its place. Your mother is still coming for Christmas Eve dinner tomorrow, Tamara asked, not looking away from the mantelpiece she was dusting with a microfiber cloth. She would not miss it, she is bringing the stockings. Tamara's hand paused for a fraction of a second. The handmade ones. Yes, it is her tradition. She has been working on them for months. Marcus heard the defensiveness in his own voice and softened it. They are important to her. I am sure they are lovely, Tamara said, and the words were polite, but they lay flat in the air. It is just, our aesthetic is very specific, Marcus. We have the new stockings I ordered. They are designer linen blend. They match the palette of the room perfectly. Marcus looked at the 3 stockings laid carefully on the sofa. They were identical, save for the sleek, block print names, Liam, Amara, Marcus, and Tamara. They were beautiful in a cold, impersonal way. He could not imagine his mother's work-worn hands touching them. He felt a familiar tension, a pulling in his chest. He was a bridge between 2 worlds, and he feared he was not strong enough to hold them both. I know, he said finally, but it is one night, for her. We can hang hers up for the evening. It would mean so much. Tamara turned to him, her smile gentle but firm. We will see. We do not want to confuse the children. Traditions are important, but we are building our own traditions now. She walked over and straightened his collar. We are a family, our own family. He kissed her forehead, breathing in her clean, floral scent. She was right. They were building their own life. He would talk to his mother, explain it gently. Clara would understand. She had to. The following evening, the air was sharp and cold, but Clara's heart was warm as she walked up the path to her son's house. It was a beautiful house, all clean lines and muted colors, so different from her own cozy cottage. She carried a large woven bag, inside which were the 3 stockings, wrapped in tissue paper like the treasures they were. She had pressed and steamed them until every stitch lay flat and perfect. Marcus answered the door, his face a mixture of warmth and a nervousness she could not quite place. "Mother, you look wonderful. Come in, it is freezing." The inside of the house was breathtakingly neat. The tree glowed, the scents of rosemary and roasted chicken filled the air, and a fire flickered in the modern gas fireplace. Liam, now 14, gave her a quick, awkward hug, but it was Amara, just 10, who ran to her and wrapped her arms around her waist. "Grandma, did you bring them?" Clara's heart swelled. "I did, my darling, I did." She followed the family into the living room, her eyes instinctively going to the mantelpiece above the fireplace, the sacred spot where the stockings would be hung. And she stopped. The air left her lungs in a silent, painful rush. There, hung with precise care, were 3 stockings. They were not her stockings. They were large, shapeless things made of a rough, beige linen. They were utterly identical, each bearing a name in a stark, modern font. They looked like something from a hotel lobby, impersonal and cold. There was no history in them, no love, no whispered wishes in the night. They were just things. Clara felt the world tilt. The bag in her hand, which moments before had felt light as a feather, now seemed to contain the weight of a lifetime. Her stockings, the ones into which she had poured her memories of Henry, her hopes for Liam's strength, her dreams for Amara's freedom, were nowhere to be seen. They were hidden away, rejected, deemed not good enough for this perfect, curated room. She could not speak. She could only stare at the garish, store-bought replacements, feeling a humiliation so profound it was a physical blow. It was a silent, public dismissal of everything she was, everything she represented. She had offered the most intimate piece of her heart, and it had been judged and found wanting. Marcus was talking about the dinner, about the wine, his voice too loud, too cheerful. Tamara was smiling, her arm linked through his, a picture of domestic bliss. Liam was already on his phone. They did not see the fracture opening up inside her. But Amara saw. Clara felt a small, cool hand slip into her own, which had gone icy cold. She looked down. Amara was staring up at her, those old soul eyes wide with understanding. The child did not say a word. She simply held her grandmother's hand tighter, her gaze flicking from Clara's stricken face to the offending stockings on the mantel, and then back again. In that silent exchange, a secret was born, a shared knowledge of a hurt too deep for words. The foundation of the evening of the family had not just cracked, it had shattered. And as Clara forced a smile onto her face and allowed herself to be led to the dinner table, the weight of the hidden stockings in her bag felt like a stone dragging her down into a cold, dark sea. The dinner would continue, the laughter would ring out, but for Clara, the magic of Christmas had vanished, replaced by the chilling certainty that in this new, modern family, there was no room for an old woman's stitches. The laughter from the living room felt like a physical force, pushing me further into the quiet sanctuary of the kitchen. I stood at the sink, my hands gripping the cool porcelain, staring out into the blackness of the winter night. The reflection in the window was a ghost of me, a woman hollowed out. Each peal of merriment from Marcus and Tamara was a tiny puncture, letting the air out of a celebration I had spent weeks carefully inflating with hope. The scent of pine and gingerbread, once so comforting, now seemed to mock me. It was all a veneer, a beautiful lie I had constructed for my family, and Tamara had taken a hammer to it with the casual cruelty of someone rearranging furniture. I could still see the look on her face, not malice, which I could have understood, fought against. It was dismissal, a bland, administrative sort of expression, as if she were clearing out outdated files. Homemade clutter, she had called them. My mother's hands, those clever, loving hands, reduced to clutter. I felt a tremor start deep inside, a vibration of pure grief that I forced down by clenching my jaw so tight a muscle spasmed in my cheek. I would not cry. I would not give her the satisfaction of seeing the wound. From my post, I could hear the low murmur of voices in the living room. Marcus's baritone, placating and soft. Then Tamara's, sharper, clearer, designed to carry. "Marcus, really, it is not a personal thing," she was saying, her tone one of exaggerated patience. It is an aesthetic decision. The metallic silver and blue theme is cohesive. It is elegant. Those other stockings, they were a hodgepodge, a visual distraction. I held my breath, waiting for my son to defend me, to defend us. To say something, anything, about the years of love stitched into those felt and sequins. His reply was a muffled rumble. I could not make out the words, but the tone was unmistakable, appeasement. He was smoothing things over, keeping the peace. The peace for whom? I wondered. Certainly not for me. The peace of his new life, a life that seemed to require the sanding down of all our old, rough-edged traditions until they were smooth, bland, and acceptable. The cold silence I was cultivating wrapped around me like a shroud, and I knew it was extending into the living room, casting a shadow over their elegant theme. Good, let it. A small hand slipped into mine. I looked down to see Amara, her large, dark eyes wide with a worry far too heavy for a child her age. She did not say anything. She just pressed her small body against my leg, a silent offering of solidarity. She felt it too, the wrongness that had settled over the house. I squeezed her hand, a fragile connection in the freezing emotional tundra. "Why do you not go see if you can find the cookie cutters, my love?" I suggested, my voice sounding strange and thin to my own ears. "We can make the gingerbread men later." She nodded, her gaze lingering on my face for a moment too long, as if memorizing the lines of my pain, before she padded quietly out of the kitchen. I thought she had gone to the pantry, but a moment later, I saw her small form dart past the living room archway and head down the hallway toward the bedrooms. Toward the closed door behind which Tamara had banished our history. I turned back to the window, my heart a lead weight. Let her look. Let her see the box where her grandmother's creations had been discarded. Perhaps it was a lesson she needed to learn young, that some people will always try to erase what they do not understand. Amara moved with a quiet purpose she had inherited from her father. The hallway was long and dark, a buffer zone between the bright, performative joy of the living room and the quiet truth of the bedrooms. She paused at the door to the guest room, the one Tamara used as a sort of dressing room. It was slightly ajar. She pushed it open, the hinge giving a soft sigh. The room smelled of Tamara's perfume, a strong floral scent that seemed to push against the older, woodier smells of the house. The closet door was closed, but Amara knew. She was a child, and children are experts in the geography of hiding places. She opened the closet door. There, on the floor, tucked behind a neat row of Tamara's expensive shoes, was a cardboard box. It was not even taped shut. The flaps were just folded over, an afterthought. She knelt, her heart beating a quick, nervous rhythm. She lifted the flap, and there they were, a jumble of color and memory. Her stocking was on top, the sequined angel she had helped me glue on last year winking up at her. Beneath it, she could see the edge of her father's S with its lopsided football, and mine with the careful cross-stitch of a Christmas tree. And at the very bottom, the faded fabric of the ones made by her Nana, who she only knew from stories and photographs. She did not hesitate. With a determination that belied her small size, she gathered the stockings into her arms, a soft, colorful bundle. They smelled faintly of cedar and cinnamon, the smell of our home, the real home. She carried them back down the hallway, her footsteps silent on the rug. She did not look toward the living room. She went straight to the mantelpiece, to the perfect, sterile row of silver and blue. With a careful, deliberate motion, she hung her own stocking first, right in the center. Then she hung her father's, then mine. She arranged them so they were touching, a little island of us amidst the cold perfection. She stood back for a moment, looking at her work. The sequins on her angel caught the firelight and glittered defiantly. A small, satisfied smile touched her lips. It was a correction, a restoration. It was that smile Tamara saw when she walked into the room. "Amara, what on earth do you think you are doing?" Her voice was a whip crack, shattering the fragile quiet. She strode across the room, her heels clicking on the hardwood floor. Marcus was right behind her, his face a mask of alarm. Amara flinched but stood her ground, placing her small body in front of the mantel as if to protect it. "I am hanging our stockings," she said, her voice surprisingly steady. "I put those away for a reason," Tamara said, her voice tight with controlled anger. She reached past Amara, her hand poised to snatch the stockings down. "This is not the look we are going for. It is cluttered. It is messy." That was when I stepped out of the kitchen. The cold silence within me had reached its limit and shattered. "Do not touch them," I said, My voice was low, but it carried a force I did not recognize. It stopped Tamara's hand in midair. She turned to me, her eyes flashing. "Clara, this is ridiculous. It is Christmas. Let us not make a scene over some old rags." "Rags?" The word was a breath of air. "These are not rags. This is my mother's work. This is our family. It is a bunch of mismatched felt that ruins the entire aesthetic of the room." Tamara shot back, her composure finally cracking. "I spent a fortune on this decor to make this holiday beautiful, and you want to drag it down with this." "Drag it down?" I took a step forward, my entire body trembling. "You think our traditions drag your holiday down? You think the love my mother stitched into these for her grandchildren is something to be hidden away in a closet because it does not match your color scheme?" Marcus moved between us, his hands up. "Mom, Tamara, please, let us just calm down. It is not worth this." "It is worth everything, Marcus," I cried, my eyes locked on Tamara. "It is worth more than all the silver ornaments in the world. It is who we are." Tamara let out a short, bitter laugh. A laugh of pure frustration, of someone who has finally had enough of humoring what she sees as nonsense. "Who you are?" she repeated, her voice dripping with a scorn she could no longer contain. "You want to hold on to this ghetto craft project like it is some kind of treasure? It is embarrassing." The word hung in the air, sharp and poisonous. "Gad." The room did not just go quiet, it went dead. The fire seemed to stop crackling. The clock stopped ticking. Marcus froze, his face draining of color as he stared at his wife. Amara looked from Tamara to me, her young mind trying to process the ugliness of the word. For me, the world narrowed to that single, venomous syllable. It was not just about the stockings anymore. It was a key turning in a lock, revealing a door I had always feared was there but had never wanted to see. It was a judgment on my mother's hands, on our food, on our music, on the very rhythm of our lives. It was a dismissal of our bloodline, our history, our soul. I looked at Tamara, and I no longer saw a difficult daughter-in-law. I saw a stranger who had been tolerating us, and the mask had finally slipped. My voice, when I found it, was a whisper, but it cut through the silence like a shard of ice. "What did you just say?" Tamara's eyes widened slightly, as if she herself was shocked by what had escaped her lips. But she did not take it back. She lifted her chin, a defiant gesture, and opened her mouth to speak, to justify, to dig the knife in deeper. But Marcus found his voice first, a raw, broken sound that I had never heard from my son before. "Tamara," it was not a name, it was a verdict. And in that single word I heard the foundation of his new life crack, and I knew that nothing, not even that the argument had ended with the sound of our bedroom door clicking shut, a sound far softer than the slam I had expected, but one that carried a finality that shook me to my core. I did not follow Tamara. I stood in the silent living room, the air still vibrating with her words. "We are his family now." They were not just words. They were a declaration of war fought with the weapon of erasure. The tree stood in the corner, a glittering monument to the New World Order, and the absence of my mother's stockings felt like two open wounds in the fabric of the room. I looked at my hands, at the faint scar on my thumb from a childhood fall my mother had kissed better. I thought of Clara, alone in her quiet house, probably sitting by her own modest tree, her hands idle in her lap, her heart a constant, dull ache of missing him. Missing me. How many times had I dismissed her quiet sadness as a natural part of her grieving process, never imagining that my own wife was actively deepening the chasm. Tamara saw my past as a competitor, my love for my mother as a finite resource that threatened the supply for her and Leo. She did not understand that love, real love, is not a pie to be divided, but a flame that grows brighter the more torches it lights. The choice was no longer abstract. It was here, in this darkened room, pressing down on me. It was not a choice between my wife and my mother. It was a choice between the man I had become, a man who allowed his past to be dismantled for the sake of a peaceful present, and the man my father had raised me to be, a man who honored his roots. To choose peace with Tamara tonight would be to sacrifice a piece of my soul. I would be agreeing that my history, my mother, was expendable. I found her in the nursery, standing over Leo's crib. The nightlight cast a soft glow on her face, and for a moment I saw only the exhausted, beautiful mother of my child. Then she turned, and her expression was guarded, hardened, expecting another round of combat. "We need to talk," I said, my voice low and gravelly. Not as adversaries, not as a husband and wife who have said things they cannot unsay. We need to talk about the person you became tonight. She folded her arms. And what person is that, Marcus? The person who wants a Christmas that is about our son? The person who is tired of living in the shadow of a ghost? No, I said, and the sadness in my voice made her flinch. The person who was cruel, the person who looked at the most sacred tradition of a grieving woman and called it junk. You did not just dismiss some thread and yarn, Tamara. You dismissed 60 years of her life. You dismissed the love she poured into every stitch for me, for my father, for the grandchildren she prayed she would live to see. You spat on the memory of the man who would have been Leo's grandfather. Tears welled in her eyes, but they were tears of anger. I am tired of competing with a memory. Do you think I do not see the look on your face when you talk about your perfect childhood? The way you retreat into this museum of nostalgia? I am here, Marcus. Leo is here. We are your life now. And do you think my love for my mother diminishes my love for you? For our son? Is your world that small? I stepped closer, my own tears beginning to fall, hot and unchecked. When I hang that stocking for Leo, it is not about the past. It is about the future. It is about him knowing that he comes from a line of people who loved deeply, who built traditions, who endured loss and still found joy. It is about giving him the same sense of belonging that my mother gave me. A belonging you are trying to strip away. I am not, she started, but her voice broke. You are, I insisted, softly but relentlessly. By calling her traditions junk, by refusing to let her have a place in this home, in our son's life, you are telling me that the first 30 years of my life do not matter. That the woman who shaped me into the man you supposedly fell in love with is an inconvenience to be managed. That is not the woman I married. The woman I married had a heart big enough to embrace all of me. The fight went out of her then. The angry tears gave way to a different kind, a silent, shameful stream that tracked through the shadows on her face. She looked from me to our sleeping son, his chest rising and falling in a rhythm of perfect peace, a peace we had shattered. I am sorry, she whispered, the words so quiet I barely heard them. I am so sorry, Marcus. It was not the apology I needed, not yet. It was a surrender, not an understanding. We went to bed in a silence that was heavy with exhaustion, lying inches apart in the dark, a chasm of hurt between us. Sleep was a distant country. I replayed every moment, every word, and I knew she was doing the same. The fracture was not just between us, it was within me. I had seen a coldness in my wife I did not recognize, and I did not know if I could ever unsee it. Christmas morning arrived not with a joyful bang, but with a slow, gray dawn. Leo's delighted coos from the monitor were the only sound as I slipped out of bed. Tamara was already awake, staring at the ceiling. I did not say anything. I walked to the hall closet, to the box marked Mom's Christmas, my heart pounding a dull, painful rhythm in my chest. I carried it into the living room. The tree sparkled, impersonal and perfect. I ignored the professionally wrapped presents. I opened the box. The scent of cedar and my mother's perfume, faint but unmistakable, rose from within. I carefully lifted the stockings. Mine with the slightly lopsided reindeer, my father's with the snowman missing a button. And the two new ones for Tamara and Leo, their patterns more complex, the love woven into them just as deep. With a solemnity that felt like a sacrament, I hung them on the mantel. They were not as sleek as Tamara's velvet ones. They were bumpy, imperfect, alive with history. They were us. They were me. They were my mother's love made visible. It was the quietest, most defiant act of my life. The morning unfolded in a strange, muted parody of holiday cheer. We watched Leo tear into presents, his laughter a stark contrast to the tension binding his parents. Tamara smiled, but it did not reach her eyes. She thanked me for my gifts, her voice flat. I could feel her watching the stockings, her gaze lingering on them not with anger anymore, but with a dawning, uncomfortable awe. They were no longer just objects. They were symbols of a love she had tried to minimize and failed. It was later, after the paper had been cleaned up and Leo was napping, that she found me in the kitchen. I was staring out the window at the barren trees, feeling emptier than I ever had on what was supposed to be the most joyful day of the year. Marcus. I turned. Her face was pale, her eyes red-rimmed and earnest. The apology I gave last night, it was not enough, she began, her voice trembling. I am not sorry about the stockings, not really. I am sorry for what they represent to me. I am sorry for my ignorance. I am sorry for my cruelty. The word hung in the air between us, ugly and true. I looked at those stockings this morning, really looked at them. I saw the hours they must have taken. I saw the love in every single stitch, and I realized I have been a fool. I have been so afraid of not being enough for you, of Leo not being enough, that I tried to bulldoze anything that I saw as a threat. She wiped her tears away with the back of her hand, a gesture that was suddenly, heartbreakingly young. I do not know how to do this. I do not know how to blend a family, even when the other part is a memory. I have a lifetime of learning to do, and I am so terribly sorry that I have to learn at the expense of your mother's feelings. And yours. It was the apology I needed. It was not an excuse, it was a confession. It came from a place of true, painful self-awareness. I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. The ice around my heart did not melt, but it cracked, and a sliver of warmth seeped through. A few days later, we stood on my mother's doorstep. Tamara was holding a small, beautifully wrapped present, but her knuckles were white from gripping it so tightly. Clara answered, her face a careful mask of neutral welcome. The air in her small living room was thick with unsaid things. After the stilted pleasantries, after Leo was settled on a blanket with his toys, Tamara took a deep breath. "Clara," she said, her voice unsteady, "I was hoping, would you teach me to knit?" The question hung in the air, more profound than any apology. My mother looked from Tamara's desperate, hopeful face to mine. I saw the conflict in her eyes, the hurt, the pride, the longing for peace. "It is not an easy thing to learn," Clara said finally, her voice soft. "It requires patience. Your hands will feel clumsy, you will make mistakes, you will have to undo your work and start over many times." Tamara nodded, a fresh tear escaping. "I know, I am ready to try." Clara gestured to the chair beside her. As Tamara sat down, hesitant and awkward, my mother opened a basket of yarn. She chose 2 smooth, wooden needles and a skein of simple, cream-colored wool. She did not speak as she demonstrated the first step, casting on the stitches, her fingers moving with a fluid, ancient grace. Then she handed the needles to Tamara. I watched as my wife, the brilliant architect who could design soaring structures, fumbled with the yarn. Her brow was furrowed in concentration, her movements stiff. Clara did not take the needles back. She gently adjusted Tamara's grip, her own wrinkled hand covering my wife's smooth one for a brief moment. "Like this," Clara murmured, "a gentle tension, you cannot force it." It was a difficult, quiet act. There was no laughter, no easy camaraderie. There was only the soft click of the needles, the whisper of wool, and the immense, silent effort of 2 women from different worlds, trying to weave the first fragile thread of a new understanding. It was not a happy ending. It was a difficult, painful beginning. And as I watched my mother guide my wife's trembling hands, I could not help but wonder if the fragile thread they were creating would be strong enough to hold the weight of our fractured family, or if it would simply snap under the strain of all that was still left unsaid.